Alright everyone, it's time for Vermont Issues, episode 21, the pros and cons of the five, decent Vermont townships. And by that I don't mean decent like, oh, these are the only good places in Vermont. I'm talking about as in of substantial enough size and integrity as communities to be worth talking about. Of course, there are hundreds of little villages scattered across Vermont. But, you probably haven't spent much time in them. The only one I have would be like Woodstock. Woodstock is really nice if you're a tourist. It's really nice if you're wealthy. Otherwise, a little bit on the lackluster side, I think, due to the cost of living. So first there's the Burlington area. Now this is our largest metropolitan area within Vermont. It's got about 125,000 people in it. So it's of decent size. The city itself is about 42,000. The surrounding areas, you've got Winooski, Essex, South Burlington, Shelburne, that general area. Burlington is really nice. Having gone to UVM, I spent a lot of time in downtown Burlington, South Burlington. Never really frequented Winooski much, although there are quite a few good businesses there. And that's basically the hub of Vermont. Essentially, if you want like the small town America feel, this is the one place in Vermont you won't get it. It's the one place in Vermont that's actually more of an actual city as opposed to these other larger communities that really are more just small town America. So if you're into that, and especially into the academic side, if you like libraries, museums, scientific institutions, they've got the Echo Center and things like that. Burlington is nice. One of the cons, though, is that it's one of the more expensive places to settle. South Burlington would be less expensive, but Burlington proper, it would be definitely there. And also, if you're into the sort of rural feel as far as legalese goes, that is a very limited set of local ordinances, Burlington's probably not your place either. For instance, I believe it's illegal to discharge a handgun within the city, or a firearm rather. I'm not sure if that applies to if your home is being broken into. It'd probably try to drag you through court anyway. They've got they've got the anti-smoking ordinance, so there's certain streets you can't even smoke if you're outside. So you have to you can't even do it on your front porch in those regions. So there is a little bit of the draconian liberalism in Burlington, definitely, but it's scenic. It's fun. It's also safe. Like every community in Vermont's safe. Burlington's safer than Rutland. Yeah, I mean the UVM campus is nice, mostly. Sometimes of year it looks a little bit disheveled because people they don't use the sidewalk. They prefer to walk through certain parts of the grass, and so it looks a little bit weird. And of course, in summer when things are the most vibrant and lush, there aren't as many people there. There's people taking summer courses or something, but it's more empty. But Burlington definitely has that energy about it of a city. Number 2 would be Rutland, which is where I live. And Rutland is the second largest sort of settled area in Vermont. It's not just the city. There's Rutland Town, which completely surrounds it, the Proctor area, West Rutland, North Clarendon, and Mendon. And that's it. It kind of is a metropolitan area up to Pittsford, but not really. Not by most people. If you're from New York City or something, you wouldn't even think Rutland City was anything other than a village anyway, though, so it doesn't really matter. Rutland is sort of like Burlington's general shopping convenience, more or less, a little bit less stuff here. But it's kind of like a miniaturized Burlington with a bit less noise. That is, in Burlington in the middle of the night, there's still significant amounts of traffic on the main routes, if you've ever done night driving in that area. In Rutland, though, it's basically empty after maybe 10 or 10:30. It's more of that small town feel, and that's on a major route, so you'll see the occasional truck going through and not much else, honestly. I like Rutland size-wise. In fact, sometimes it might be a little bit big for me, and something closer to Bennington would be more my, sort of Virgins would be more my style, but Rutland is nice, but then you've got the cons. The cons are the property crime rate is rising. And this is due to con number 2, which is the opiate epidemic has hit this region harder than Burlington. We've also got some issues with dilapidation, where the roads, the side roads and sidewalks, are kind of fucked up as compared. Burlington does a better job generally of maintaining things. Although there is a patch of blight in Burlington as well on the southern end, really off the sides of the main road, where it hasn't been cared for quite as much. Rutland along its main routes is basically pristine. It's the sort of, you have to go into the gut or certain other areas to find sort of that urban decay. But Rutland is good for those who want sort of a large town feel, but they don't want it to feel quite so much like a city. And there's more nature in the general surrounding area because it's smaller, because it's less settled. Number 3 would be the Brattleboro area. And Brattleboro doesn't really have much of a metro area to it per se until you cross the Connecticut River. You've got easy access to New Hampshire for shopping, which is why the Brattleboro downtown is more compact and less developed, I think, than like Rutland or something like that. And that's also quite, I mean, you've got scenic river views. It's set up, it's sort of the old style downtown approach. Quite a few larger apartment buildings as well. It's more compact than some towns of its comparable size, certainly something like Bennington. And it's a nice place, but it's a little bit quirky. You've got a lot of the artsy stuff. I think, I can't remember which college is in the region, but that's like, half the population or something. So it's scenic, but again, Brattleboro too has been hit hard by the drug crisis. So it has that problem. I believe the crime rate there is a bit higher than like a Burlington or a Rutland, partially because of travel, I think, back and forth from New Hampshire. But if you like going to the beach, you'd be a good half hour closer to it. If you're going to Hampton or Salem or something, it'd be easier to get there from Brattleboro. And it also gives you easy access to the Keene, New Hampshire area, and Keene is like a Rutland on steroids. It's a bit larger, more developed. And of course, no sales tax to speak of. That's always an advantage. Number 4 would be Bennington, and this is more of the historical small town feel, as opposed to the more developed, shopping-friendly small town appeal of like a Rutland or the artsy feel of a Brattleboro. It's really more about history. It's got the Bennington Monument. It's close to Glastonbury Mountain, and it's reasonably developed in and of itself as well. Again, though, it lacks sort of the extended metro area, and once you get 6 or 7 blocks from the downtown, more or less, you're basically in a rural area. So if you like that even smaller sort of feel, Bennington is good. And I believe they've been hit a bit less by the opiate epidemic. The crime rate's a bit lower. And it is scenic. It's well cared for, you can tell. And the 5th would be the Barre-Montpelier area. Now, this is not one city. It's a city and then a town basically attached to it. They're right next to each other. And it's one solid metro area between the two. There'd be gas stations and restaurants between them. Montpelier obviously is the capital of the state. So you get the historic sites, you get the capital and everything else. Barre is basically a smaller version of Rutland. It's got a decent shopping apparatus. Last time I was there, which was quite a few years ago, it looked a bit run down. That is that Barre appeared to have a few problems, but that may be an anecdote that doesn't hold weight because that was not long after the housing crisis, so that could have skewed my opinion of the area, could have recovered much more now. But it's generally it's a nice area. Montpelier is a scenic route, so to speak. Anytime you're driving down the road there, it's basically all nature, and then you loom up into Montpelier proper, and you get all of these large sort of government buildings. And they're very immaculately cared for. That's where our tax money goes, to pay for these idiots up in that particular part of the state. And then Barre is where you would go, generally shopping and so forth. So those are the 5 sort of developed regions in Vermont. There are others. White River Junction kind of counts, but it's eclipsed by Lebanon right across the river. Doesn't really have a downtown feel much to it, per se. Because basically it's just a big residential area that then goes shopping in New Hampshire. So there aren't a lot of businesses. A couple gas stations and a restaurant basically is what you get there. Also some government services. There are others. Middlebury would count. Middlebury is rapidly, by the way, expanding because it's at a convenient location for people who are commuting to Burlington, essentially. The Virgins area as well. That sort of metro area, though, even though Middlebury and Virgins are also of decent size, is not on the same order as a Rutland or a Burlington, or even, I believe, a Bennington, even if it's rapidly growing. You wouldn't believe how much growth happens up there. It's like if you go to Woodstock, it looks the same as it did 15 years ago. Nothing has changed. Nothing's even been repainted in the whole village that I'm from as a little kid. It looks exactly the same. Last time I was there, I was like, oh, it's like wandering into a dream. It's like true nostalgia because it doesn't change at all, and probably never. 100 years from now, it'll look exactly the same. Rutland, is slowly growing over time. A few new houses go up in Rutland Town, maybe a new box store in Rutland City, and that's sort of the limit. Middlebury, my goodness, year after year you go there and it continues to grow. It's urban sprawl on the southern and northern ends along the main road to service people that are going to and from the Burlington area, but they've got Middlebury College, which is highly ranked. We might see some auxiliary growth here because Castleton is now turned into a university and has purchased new housing. They're talking about expanding, which, by the way, I support. It's a good idea. But Middlebury has it made as far as that goes, and they've got the nice central sort of green, sort of like Woodstock on steroids. It's a nice community. Virgins is a little bit smaller. Like when you're on the main road, you look out to the side and you see sort of the downtown and houses in Virgins. But the main road is just, again, a few businesses along that route that are servicing people that are in movement. They're not really going to Virgins. They're going past Virgins. Some commercial outlets take advantage of that. And the entire Champlain Valley, by the way, is different from the rest of Vermont. The area from roughly Brandon up towards Burlington along Lake Champlain, it looks different. It's more flat, a lot of farms. Very, very beautiful at certain times of year when you're around a little south of the Shelburne area. You can get some extreme views. You can see halfway across the state, actually, from some of those hills, because you're looking out at the entire Champlain Valley. It's very impressive. A lot of sort of the wineries and farms and touristy places there, but more functioning, as opposed to the Connecticut River side of the state where you've got touristy stuff that doesn't really trickle down to anybody in the local region making any sort of money. They can't even afford the products. So, there are different styles. Vermont's not homogenized. There is no hegemonic sort of single Vermont feel, which some people think. They go to Killington, and they think that's Vermont. That's only one part of it. The sort of Green Mountain feel is the middle of the state. Then you've got a Connecticut River sort of culture that's totally different from the Champlain Valley. There's even a different lingo spoken. The accents of people that are raised up on that side of Vermont as opposed to this side are actually different. The Connecticut River has its own sort of accent group. I've got a little bit of that myself, more of the old-time sounding Vermont accent, because I was raised, until I was ready to go to high school, I was living on the other side of the state. This side of the state, it's more neutral. It's more like the Hudson, sort of the upstate New York and the parts of the Midwest accent. So the way things sound is different. The architecture is a bit different. Usually the fiscal approach is different too. This side of Vermont's a little bit more business friendly because there's a little bit more development going on in the Champlain Valley down through Rutland into Bennington. The other side, it's a few communities along the river, and then we've got our capital, which spawns Barrie as its shopping center, basically. And so that's really what you get in Vermont. And then you go up to the Northeast Kingdom, there's nothing there. It's basically empty. It's honestly that part of Vermont, that whole quarter, it's a little bit spooky because it's so empty. It's almost like a pristine wilderness still. That's about all. Peace out.